Phil, can you hear me? Okay,
Can you hear me? Oh, Maria, we are set. All right, you and I, we're just gonna sort this out. We'll be done in 10 minutes.
perfect.
Okay.
Get ready.
Oh,
Hey,
check.
there we go.
Oh,
There we
can you
go.
hear us?
Yes.
Okay. I think my mic is the one. That was probably intentional.
Yeah.
Well, I figured.
Yeah. Can you hear Maria? All right. There you go. Cool.
Check, check. Okay.
All right. It's one, and we're all talking to each other. So let's get started. Corey, now you have a mic, would you like to begin?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, President Jackson. We are gathered here for a deep dive into our facilities committee plan, and we're excited about that work in front of us. We have some amazing individuals with us today, and we also let's welcome School Board of Director Maria Iniguez, who is on Zoom with us. Thank you for joining. We also have Phil Crocker with us on Zoom. Phil, thanks for being here today.
You bet.
And then we have David Bodine here in person with us, and David's with us to both David and Phil are here to walk us through our facilities committee report. We had a report from one of our facilities committee members back in June, on June 24th, and we went through a slide deck that shared kind of our journey, but the request from the school board at that time was we'd like to learn more and how and where the recommendation for a new Wenatchee High School and upgraded HVAC facilities came from. And so that's what today is all about. And Phil is going to walk us through that facilities committee report document, which our board members have linked on the agenda for today, and our community members can follow along as well. Phil, I know you are here ready to rock and roll. Are you ready if I pass the microphone over to you?
I am. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, nice to see everyone. President Jackson, directors, appreciate the opportunity. I apologize I couldn't be there in person. I'm on a holiday with the family, but uh, when the superintendent asked if I'd be willing to meet with you, I said, heck yeah, of course. This is good stuff. So we're tucked in here. So thank you again. As and just to share, for those of us you that haven't met us, our firm, we focus on the education side of facility planning. And then we partner with folks like David Bodine and his firm for the construction, costing, site layout, pieces like that. And then we both interface with architects from our respective skill sets. So as we go through and you have questions, we may kick those over to David because they may be more appropriate for him to respond to than me. We try to stay in our respective lanes, but I will share the document, assuming that everyone's sort of looking at it on their own screen, and I'll reference page numbers if I go through. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, you bet. So as you see, the you know the and by the way, I always wonder if anyone ever actually reads the entire report or if they just take the board summary PowerPoint and run with it. So this is warming my heart. So thank you all very much. Um, so as you can see, the report's broken into a little bit about the district and the committee. That starts out with like why are we doing this? Then we'll go into the enrollment projections. We'll talk about capacity and utilization of your buildings, and that ties into enrollment projections. We'll talk a little bit about the condition of your facilities, both functional and physical. We'll talk about the committee input. That's the committee you heard from, and we'll give a little bit more detail about the background of that committee, and I can add some color to the conversations that occurred throughout the course of the year that that committee met. And then, of course, the final recommendation, which you'll find to look eerily similar to the recommendation that the committee brought you forward with some additional pieces and color to it. And I would say feel free, because of the remote video piece, please just interrupt. If you have a question as we're going through, just please blatantly interrupt me because I won't be able to see a hand or a note very well. Does that sound like a good approach?
We can do that, Phil.
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So basically the intro chapter, this is put together in order that we assume maybe you end up hiring an architect or there's a firm that comes in or even community members who might not understand, exactly the whole context of it. So we have a little context about the community, the Wenatchee community. Every community is unique and different. And Wenatchee certainly, and I don't just say that offhandedly, Wenatchee is experiencing some things unique in the state around demographics and taxes and who's moving there and what it's been historically and what it's moving to. So we want to capture a little bit of that in this first chapter because it contextualizes the work and the decisions that will be made. We then have information about the school district, which you're obviously very familiar with. We also include the mission statement, your Wenatchee promise, and the Big Six, because as we did our work with the committee, we kept these at the forefront. These more than just words on a page. These are the filters through which decisions are made. So as we're working with the committee, and as we brought them information as they asked questions, these excellence in learning, equity, accountability were kept at the forefront of both the conversations, the analysis, and then the final recommendations. And that's I would encourage the board to continue to do the same as you make decisions about what to do next. We talk a little bit about the purpose of the study. It was to develop a long-range facility master plan that's rooted in data and educational program, and that was successful. We talk a little bit about the commissioning of the study group, that we were the consultants and we were commissioned to facilitate the group, but it wasn't our decisions. It was the committee's analysis, and boy, they did it in tenfold. They asked for a lot of information between meetings, and we'd bring it back, and there was a lot of discussion. And I would say the conclusions they came to and the considerations and recommendations they moved forward were deeply rooted in the committee's work. We did not lead them down a path and hope that they got to point B. That we facilitated and supported them as they went down that path. One thing it was not, we wanted to make sure everyone understood it wasn't about reduction in staff. It wasn't about reduction in expenses. It was really a planning study that followed the data and the educational program needs. We also, one piece of data that we made sure that we did include was, again, this would fall into this sort of unique aspect of Wenatchee, was we wanted to make sure that the committee understood and could appreciate leveraging the available school construction assistance program funds, because you've had those bankrolled for a while and your taxpayers have paid for them. And if they don't use them, they just pay for them and somebody else uses them. So let's try to maximize those. And I feel really strongly that worked. Our methodology was we came in, we reviewed your program. So as education experts, we got familiar with the programs at each school. Each of your elementaries has a unique flavor. I always say there's the art, there's the science of education and the art of education. And the science is thankfully very consistent across your district, and the art form is unique to the individuals in each building. So we understood that and why they were using spaces and how they were. And then we again looked at your enrollment projections, your capacity, of your current capacity, your future capacity, and then brought all that information forward, as well as with the building condition information to the committee, and then facilitated them developing options for addressing those items that came up. And then finally, a list of data resources. Again, just if anyone ever asked, where did this come from? Hopefully this chapter gives them some guidance and context. Questions before we get into enrollment projections?
I just have a question. If no other directors do at this point. Phil, a couple of things. As you're talking about kind of the introduction piece, what you and David both work on with a lot of school districts in a lot of areas. What was your takeaway from the Wenatchee experience? So what was different about our group, our team? You mentioned that they asked for a lot of information. And I know when we were first getting started, we had some local things that we were working on. Our budget reduction plan for 24-25 included new schedules for all of our secondary buildings and the elimination of an elementary school. So that was like right before your first meeting with this community. But what are some other uniquenesses that you found maybe with the Wenatchee group or the makeup of our team?
Yeah, well, sorry, I'm just reflecting back. For those of you that don't know, Corey dropped that info on me like maybe 48 hours before the first meeting. So that was fun, but it was good and it was authentic. Certainly it created this. So I would say that would be one thing, Corey. There was no sense, it was a very diverse group. And we had recommended, and you came through in spades, that we had folks who were very supportive of the district and folks who were really challenging of the district at the time. And we thought it's good to have both folks in the room to really make sure that we have these conversations that aren't just in an echo chamber. And so we definitely had some folks who had us on our heels as district representatives right out of the chute. But that allowed for some really authentic conversations, especially with some of those hot ticket items. The quality of the folks was really impressive. We had folks from the college, we had elected officials, we had law enforcement, administration there. It really felt very representative of the community. One of the largest challenges sometimes we have is when we come in and they've handed us, everybody works for the school district except for the two people who are retired teachers. And so that's not very representative of the community. So I felt like yours really, really did. And we really love those folks who came out swinging. They did not feel like maybe this conversation was going in the right direction or had been historically going in the right direction. And our whole goal was to get to a consensus recommendation at the end that everyone could sign their name on. And that took a while. And I think this group also was patient and persistent in the sense of we had a lot of meetings, maybe 50% more than many districts your size, but the group wanted to continue to do that because they wanted to work to that consensus. Corey go ahead.
No, I would just add to that. I felt we were challenged a lot through it. And I'd say our team, it wasn't just information wasn't just accepted for what it was. It was come back to the table, show us what it is, how did we get there and where it came to be. And so the committee never just said, oh, that's what they said, and we'll go with it. And so we got really in depth because we were challenged on every step of the way, which just meant it was a very engaged committee. And often I find we go through a lot of these, it's like, oh, all right, you guys said it, it's good to go. Where'd you come up with that? How did you get there? What does this really entail?
Yeah.
It was awesome for us to be like, okay, these guys really know what they're talking about. They want to be engaged in it. They want to understand. And I think ultimately that led to where we ended up at the very end. I don't know if we would have got to every piece that we did at the very end if we weren't challenged and discussed every individual topic that we did.
Very well said, David.
Excellent. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we worked really hard. They made us work really hard. That was a good thing. Okay, any other questions before enrollment projections?
Yes, Phil, I've got one hot button that I was camping on thinking it was probably fit in better later, but I'm just going to vote now for you to decide when to talk about, and David, about that topic, since Corey talked about what's happening in other school districts and how comparatively we are. I would very much like an awareness of trends, what I call trends and patterns in room sizes and usages, what I call the interior architecture of how teaching and learning is expected to happen or is happening, that was adaptable in the long term. Now, I don't know what you're looking at, and I'm particularly thinking of the high school, where we see little bits of it in the elementary and middle schools already. Movements change, curriculum changes, emphasis changes. And I'm really, really interested. That's why I'm so excited that you're part of this team as an outsider, because I don't expect too many people inside the district to have a clue. They'll know more than I do, but not much about, what should we be looking at to somehow get to a point where the future schools, the interior education architecture is adaptable, responsive, and aware of what it might need to look like.
Boy, the hard questions don't end with the committee work. That's for sure. That's a good one. I appreciate it. How about if we have a conversation around that when we get to capacity, because that talks about the spaces and the number of spaces. Would that be appropriate?
So I did say I thought I might be saying that at the wrong time.
No, that's okay. No, but you're giving me some time to think about it while I talk about this other, so I appreciate it. But we'll have a good conversation about that. It's a great question and one we're passionate about. Let's talk a little bit about enrollment projections, though, because that is another piece that, while not unique to Wenatchee, is important to Wenatchee. As you're aware, statewide, the states lose, declining in enrollment about 4 to 5% over the last couple of years. Wenatchee has been on this track longer than some, and our anticipation is that you will remain on this track, where you will see, while you add housing, you'll be seeing less students. We're not perfect in this by any stretch. our projections that we use through our tool K-12 Enroll are 99.6% accurate on next year projections statewide. Doesn't mean every district is 99.6, but they are very accurate for you, and they have been over the last few years. Obviously, the further out you get past the first year, the less accurate they get. And things can happen at the local level that our system it can only respond to the data we have. So, and we'll talk about how we account for that and how we laid that out for the committee. One thing you'll notice on this graph, you don't have to be an expert to say what's up with the blue line. There's actually 5 projections in this graph. 4 of them are incredibly tightly bound, even though they're 4 completely separate algorithms. The 5th one is not tightly bound. And that is because of an anomaly in the federal data that we use for housing calculations. Occasionally, in certain situations, it goes bananas, and your district was one of those. So in this report, as we get to that one, we will explain that. We included it for transparency so that no one could ever say we doctored the data, but we are ignoring that outlier because it doesn't carry any integrity for your community. And there's different data we're now using, but it wasn't ready at the time of this publication. So we kept that in there. So that you can see that basically the blue line up until 24-25 is your enrollment history. And what we saw around the state was if you looked at 1920 and 2021 and 21-22, there tended to be a COVID dip, a V shape, if you will, that bounced back up. And some districts are actually at or higher than they were in 1920. You had a dip and then you just kind of kept dipping. Not drastically. We're not going off a cliff here, but it's been fairly consistent. And that is why the other 4 algorithms ended up being so tightly bound, as the history is very consistent. So the enrollment projections are done with a percent change formula, which is what it sounds like. It's basically, we look historically at the percent by each grade level of enrollment change and then apply that forward. That's what OSPI uses, and it can be fairly accurate unless things get volatile, and then it's not. So COVID created a situation where for 13 years, OSPI's data was going to be a bit erroneous until it sorted itself out. So we also use a regression formula, which helps even that out. And it looks back over hiccups. As you can see from your history, you don't have a lot of hiccups, but so the regression formula is going to be very tightly bound to the percent change. We then use 2 cohort analysis, which is looking at cohorts of students as they move through. One is linear K, and that pegs the analysis on kindergarten enrollments. So what number of students are enrolling in kindergarten every year? And then we have a similar analysis that's natality K. And what that does is that's looking at birth rates. And how many students are being born? And I'm sure everyone's aware, nationwide, birth rates have been going down. And everyone kind of ignored them at first because they go up and down over time, but they haven't bounced back. And they're continuing a decline. And it's really interesting. As a quick aside, we had the chance to talk to the Hungarian Ministry of Education in Hungary and in Ireland on a different project, and they both are experiencing the same thing. In fact, in the EU, they're experiencing the same thing. So it's a bit of a worldwide phenomenon right now that there's less children being born for a longer stretch of time than there has been historically. And I put that caveat in because it could turn tomorrow. It could change. It's changed over time, but this is a longer stretch than we've seen in our lifetimes. So that's what natality K is. So again, birth rates are down, kindergarten enrollments are down. So of course they're going to look a lot like the percent change model. It's not, your district is unique that these are so tightly bound. We only have one other district that is this tightly bound, and it's actually going up, tightly bound, not down. Most districts, these are more scattershot because the history has been more volatile. And then again, the housing unit, you can imagine in your community, you are adding houses, but you're not adding students in those houses. That's not the community moving into your district right now. So those are those pieces, and we can go through them real quick. For each of those, I think the graphs are probably easiest to see. We have a lot of the detailed calculations, and we'll summarize those at the end. But here's your percent change model, just a constant downslope. If we do the linear regression model, it's looking very, very similar. And as you can see in the tables, we do break it out by grade band to see sometimes there are anomalies in the grade bands that are telling. In your case, that won't be the case. So the cohort survival, the linear K, again, looks very similar. The natality K, again, looks very similar. This is where you start questioning why you pay consultants when everything looks identical, right? And then this is the erroneous one. And we call that out in the text right up here so that in the future, someone won't look at it and go, yeah, but I think we're going to gain students. No, I'd be very much surprised if that was the case. So when we look at a summary model, you've seen that piece, but what we do is we run another algorithm that then gives you a high and a low and a best. And our best is what we say is when we did the math, and we're historically 99, we were 99.4% accurate. Now we're 99.6. So we continue to refine it. For you, that green line is the best. And the committee largely felt that that was the right trajectory to follow in the data. Some communities say, yeah, but Phil, your system and you don't know about this new housing complex or this new thing coming in or XYZ. And then that's what the bands are for. That's what the high and the low is for. If you think the system is overshooting, you can use the lower one. If you think we're undershooting, you can use the higher one, or you can pick a line in between. But the committee felt pretty comfortable with the trend. This is an area when David said we were pressed hard on data, they did not take this at face value. We spent, I think, 3 meetings talking about the data behind enrollment projections. We ended up doing an analysis of private school enrollment in your district and in the surrounding districts and statewide. And sort of spoiler alert, you're probably going to see a little bit more private school or not. That would include, and we included the charter school that you have in the private school, even though they're different. There's a public charter school, as you know, but basically not in your schools, school-age kids. You have a couple percentage points that you can still, before you hit the state average. And when we look at the state average, it holds pretty consistently at about 12%. So people were very alarmed. Some of these schools are going to bring on a high school and they haven't historically, there've been a K-8 or there's this. We think that you're near the point where that's kind of evening out and it'll likely just track at that state average. There's nothing in your district that would be one of those things that would drive entire family groups away or bring entire family groups in. So anyhow, so that was, we spent a good meeting and a half on that. We also did a correlation with the Port had done a big study on growth in your community, and it didn't match declining enrollment. So everyone's like, what's up? So we did that, and we correlated the housing units and their data. And at the end, the committee saw that their data actually really tightly correlated with the enrollment data, because the growth happening in your community is just not happening with school-age children or with young families that haven't yet had school-age children. Tends to skew older. And house prices are going up, not down. So entry-level housing is not the focus. So there's all these variables that we pulled apart because the committee didn't take it at face value. They wanted to know. So at the end, they went with that green line. As a board, you certainly don't have to follow the green line. But I would say that in any case, you likely are going to continue to see slow enrollment change in a downward trend. And it's not reflective at all of anything happening in the district. It's reflective of state and national norms. And if that starts to change, it'll likely change in the outer years. Like you won't see the change for maybe 7 to 10 years. As it starts to change, then the graphs will start to change. Oh, and by the way, this is a tool that you now have these graphs on your website. It feeds a facilities dashboard that the district has put up. And this data gets updated every year. And as long as the district continues to use the tool, then those facilities dashboards on your district website will continue to get updated every year without you having to reinvest in any analysis. It just happens automatically. So that will help. We did look at grade. We talked a little bit about grade span. Sometimes what we see is we'll see maybe high school and middle school declining, but elementary going up. And that tells us, okay, right, you've kind of bottomed out and these elementary kids are going to move through and things are going to pick up. Sometimes we see middle and high school increasing or flat, and in kindergarten, elementary going down. That often indicates maybe really compelling programs that kids from other districts are coming to at the secondary level, but they're staying in their home districts for elementary. In your case, none of those really, it was all pretty consistent. As you can see, the green line here for K5, the green line for 6-8, and I promise you page numbers. I'm on 214 for those following along, and the green line for high school. Very, very stable, very similar. Unfortunately, all decreasing, but I would again say things well out of our control in the district. Just that is our reality for the for the foreseeable future. We did talk about additional considerations, and again, yours was that you're reaching the state average of about 12% of non-enrolled students in your schools, and we anticipate that will hold steady after that. Questions on enrollment projections?
I was just gonna say, I will agree with Phil that we did a pretty exhaustive discussion of this with the committee. So I heard it. And if you guys don't have any questions, I will agree that we did a lot of work.
Yeah. I got a lot smarter. They pressed me hard. I had to learn a lot about the greater Wenatchee area, and it was great.
Well,
But it was
Phil,
all, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say we appreciate the work that you all did, because it was a time of we needed to answer the questions that were out there in our community. So it created trust and honesty and transparency in the group, which I think that everyone benefited from as we continued to need to have those meetings. I just wanted to thank you for alerting not only the board, but also anyone who might be watching this in the community that we do have a facilities committee webpage, and that the dashboard is part of that webpage. And it's a wealth of information, just as this report is that you're going through as well. So thank you for that clarification.
Oh, you bet. And I believe on that facilities webpage are all of the meeting notes and the present PowerPoint presentations and handouts that the committee utilized. So if everybody wants to connect the breadcrumbs, they can.
Hey, Phil, is there any chance you can do a quick 2-minute look at the dashboard? Do you have that easily accessible or not?
Sure.
Just,
yeah.
I think it'd be nice for the board to quickly just kind of see what we got up on the website.
Yeah.
That way you can direct all your friends there.
Let me stop sharing, and this should be it. You seen the Wenatchee website?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So this is under departments, and if you go to oh, I just messed that up. But if you go to departments and you go to facilities and capital projects, then it's right there on that homepage, and it lists, and people can hover over the schools and get information about each school. They can zoom in and out, look at the area, and then you'll recognize these now that you've gone through it. Here's your enrollment projections. And then they're broken down by grade range. So here's elementary, along with each of your schools and the capacity calculations and the utilization calculations. And then down here, we have a projected 2030 projected utilization. So people can look at that and compare. And these are all sortable if they want. And we'll talk about that in the next chapter. But basically, folks can get that information. What this is telling you here is that your enrollment is above your utilization, your capacity right now in elementary, but you're quickly coming into capacity, and then you'll likely drop below. So the fact that you didn't have an entire school's worth of kids that you are over, and so in the next year or two, you'll be completely right sized, and you're addressing it right now with some use of portable buildings that you can then decide if you want to continue to use them or not as space opens up in the main buildings. At the middle school level, your enrollment continues and is projected to continue to be well below your capacity. So there's plenty of room there. Though as a middle school teacher, I'll say that every middle school feels like they don't quite have enough room, but you do. And we say that tongue in cheek. Your staff and your principals get it, and they're great. And they're using the space they have to just do great work right now. And then at the high school, again, you're slightly over capacity, dealt with some program pieces and some different classroom use. And we'll talk about, this is where we can talk about the use of the spaces, and then it'll slightly pull in, but this is the one place where we anticipate you're not going to be wildly under, and you only have one building, where at the elementaries, you do have the ability to redistrict a little bit if you end up with bulges. Here, you're out of space, and you're likely going to stay out of space if nothing's done. As that's what that tells us. And then we did look at the other programs, which was Castle Rock and Valley Academy. Those are very different spaces, obviously, very different programs. So to bucket them together is a little goofy, but you can see that Valley Academy is, if you can see it here, is over capacity. They run a very unique program, but given that space, that's challenging for them. And then Castle Rock is just about right sized. It'll ebb and flow, but your pre-K program is doing fine there. So that's and then this is where we'll go through this. It tracks your physical condition and the functional adequacy of each of the spaces so that folks can have a quick look at that. Green is good, the yellowish is fair, and then the orange is poor. And
Bill,
go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here just for the last thing we talked about. Valley was over capacity. We've moved that building. So that 115% took in consideration the previous building, not the new building.
Exactly.
Anyone's listening to
Thank
that, they're like, wait, we just moved them.
No, sorry. Thank you.
Just so you know. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I wasn't aware. That's good. That's good because that I'm pretty sure that if we cheat and go down here and look at Valley Academy, yeah, the functional adequacy of that building was poor because it wasn't meeting the needs of the program. So that's fantastic that you moved it. So that's on your website. And while these scores won't change until you do a new study and survey, what will change with all these graphs and the years out, every year it'll adjust and give you projections out to 31, 32. So this next November, it'll update itself and continue to give you projections as long as you want to have that feature. So there you go.
Fantastic, Phil. Thanks for taking us there. I think that's a great tool for our community and for our own staff as well.
Well, and it allows, they don't have to dig through the report for that information. That was the thought, is that tends to be information that boards use regularly, or that community members might say, well, what does it look like K5, or what's a building situation look like? The other thing is every year also, while our system will update the enrollment projections, we can get from the district the updated numbers for each of the buildings, and it'll adjust the capacity and utilization calculations automatically for you. So you'll have that fresh too every year. Excellent. Which is a segue into capacity and utilization. So capacity is how much room you have in each building. And there's designed capacity, which architects use, which is how many, okay, this classroom is 900 square feet. We can fit 30 kids in here. So that'll be a design capacity. What we know is that you only want to have 24 kids in that age of classroom. And we know that we don't have the benefit of getting equal amounts of kids at every school at every grade level. So what we've come up with is what we call the imperfect fit factor, or IF squared. At 95% imperfect fit factor, it really gets eerily close to what the actual programmatic capacity can be of a building. So that's how we calculate capacity, is we take the number of classrooms, and we'll show that here. We take the number of classrooms that you have. We look at how many students per class that you want to have. We do that math. So here's your instructional space model standards. These are district standards. So kindergarten, you'd want 20, and at grade 5, you'd want 26 kids. And then obviously they're a little bit higher for secondary. You do see that CTE is 24. You can have more than 24 kids, but that's where you get funded with your Perkins dollars to 24. So that tends to be, and there's good reasons. I mean, if you've ever, thankfully, I never had to sub a shop class when I was a teacher, but that terrifies me to think of a lot of kids and, moving saw blades. So I think there's some good reasons sometimes to have 24. And then your special education self-contained classrooms are those ones where the kids are primarily getting their services in that classroom, and then they're going out as much as they can for socialization. But you have a large number of adults usually in those classrooms, as well as a kitchenette, as well as some specialty, apparatus for physical mobility issues. So those tend to be 9 kids in those spaces. And then the high school is really similar to the middle school. So this is that imperfect fit factor we talked about. At the elementary level, we take our calculation, we apply it by 95%, and that gives you your programmatic capacity. At the middle school and high school, you'll see those are slightly different because you use a model that's the most common model where teachers prep in their classrooms. So if there's 6-period day and I was an ELA teacher, I get 1 period of prep without kids and I get it in my classroom without kids, which means my classroom is used 5 of 6 periods for kids and it's empty 6 period. And if you have a 7-period day, it's used 6 of 7 periods. Schools that move to a 4-period day and they still keep that model, they're at 25% of their school is unused at any given time. That gets very expensive. So 5 and 6 periods tend to be the common. So you can see those come out to be 83 and 86% calculations, and then we still do apply the 95% because it really reflects reality more. Really reflects reality, of course. It reflects reality more than just a straight 83 or 86 for the exact same reasons. Advanced French 2 does not have the same number of kids as 9th grade English. And so we have to account for those variabilities. You still want to offer that class, but there's no way you're going to have 27 kids in it. So that's how that helps account for it. And so we do those calculations, and that gives you, this is all of your elementary schools, for example, the number of classrooms by grade level, the specialty spaces, and you'll see at elementary level, there's no capacity in these specialty spaces. And that the reason for that is because elementary teachers, the kids go to a specialist while the elementary teacher preps in their room. So we don't want to double count the kids. So it's different. They're not scheduled in with the specialist, but they do go to the specialist. So that's why those have zeros at the elementary level. And then there's an imperfect fit factor and a permanent capacity of 2,830 kids. So the same thing in here at the middle school and high school levels with the scheduling factor layered in and then the imperfect fit factor. And here you'll notice though, that every class does have a capacity because there's not the concept of specialists. We're capturing that same prep concept in the scheduling factor. And then the high school is similar. So now that's how we get to an authentic programmatic capacity that if you aimed for that, or if we use it in our calculations, every kid could be taught and your program, your program as you define it could be delivered inside the core buildings without having to have portables. Questions on that before we get to utilization on capacity?
So for the high school, you're saying we have the capacity to serve all the kids in the building. I realize we're going to talk a little bit more next, but based on the capacity algorithm, you do have enough room without?
No.
Okay.
What I'm saying is if you have capacity for 1,983 kids.
Got it. Okay.
In the high school. And if you have more than that, that means like, okay, either you have to increase class size, change program and not offer some of the classes that don't have as many kids, drop electives or utilize portable spaces to keep that program delivery. Correct.
That's what I thought when we were doing this the first time. I was like, whoa, did we switch this?
No. I'm just trying to get folks to understand that's how capacity is calculated in a what we call programmatic capacity so that you can have some confidence in it. And then there's some numbers at the elementary schools. Anytime you're between 85, you don't want to be so far under capacity that you're wasting space. If you have too many schools, that's one of the challenges is they cost more to operate and you're just not, it's not the best stewardship of the community's resources. So 85 to 95% is a really good place to be for elementary, especially if you're not growing too dramatically. If you're growing dramatically, you don't want to get much above 90 because you're going to need 5 or 6 years to put a new school together from start to finish, and you're going to be at 100 by then. So 85 to 95% capacity is real comfortable, and that's where your graph we showed earlier is bringing you down into that space, and I think you guys are going to be really right-sized. You're currently at 94% total capacity, but you're going to keep just sort of gently sliding down into that, and that'll be fine. You see, it'll bring you down to 89. So you're in a really good spot, I think, at the elementary level. At the middle school level, you're really at a low rate. You're 77 to 78%. And again, we're anticipating some declining enrollment. So, your one middle school is at 96%. So, you're comfortable, but you have some room at your middle schools to do some thinking about how you want to do that space, how you want to utilize those spaces. That can be everything from grade configuration to to other programs using some of the same spaces. But I anticipate you'll have plenty of room at the middle schools. And at the high school, you're currently at 100 and, let's see, your west side's at 94%. And together the schools are at 103%, which is not surprising to anyone. And then, again, west side, we did count in the use of the classrooms at west side, we did include the portables because they're sort of permanent portables there, as how for program delivery. So we talked about that and we saw that earlier. In 5 years, we anticipate you'll still be north of 100%. At the high school level, you have a few other levers, one being running START, one being Skill Center. Not every student necessarily has to be on campus every hour, but you hate to have to pull those levers because you don't have enough space or you don't have the right spaces. And so that you want to have those as options, not that. And then your other schools we talked about, and you've already moved Valley. So that's what these tables articulate for you and show. And again, except for the high school level, your trajectory is that you're going to be very comfortable on the number of spaces you have, with the middle school being a little bit low actually on utilization out into the future. So some thoughts there wouldn't be. I know the district is doing some thinking around that. We had a question earlier on types of spaces and utilization of spaces. And so I'll take a quick stab and tell me if I'm going down the right piece here. When new schools are thought through, whether that be a remodel or new spaces, especially at the secondary level, we have become really thoughtful about maximizing the use of space. So for example, there are many CTE programs that can utilize the same type of space. So can think of it like a sort of a dry lab and wet lab, but they're both have high ceilings, have storage. They're flexible spaces that can be used for everything from engineering to construction management to robotics, because those programs change over time. So rather than building an auto body shop or a ceramic shop or a wood shop, we can think about these flex labs that can do a wide array of things in the science, engineering, and career preparation fields. And this, not everything fits in, but you can sort of bundle things: photography and sports medicine and some health services can often all fit their programs comfortably into the same types of spaces. We also have been doing things where we'll put two CTE labs adjacent one classroom. So there's a direct instruction space and a lab space, and those two programs and two teachers coordinate the program so that they're maximizing 3 spaces rather than 4, and they're not in collision. And that works pretty well. So what we try to avoid at all costs is dead space not being used, because it's either not the right space or we built something and only have 3 sections of it, but we have a 7-period day. So it sits empty for 7 periods. On classrooms.
That's something really quick too.
Yeah, please jump in.
Let's say one of the other things that we talked about, Martin, I'm directing these because this is one of your questions, was like more modular furniture. Whereas right now the science labs have a fixed bench in a fixed place. And so you're not able to move that. You're not able to adjust the size. And a lot of those classrooms are kind of, this is what it has to be forever, versus having some flexibility, not just to the size of the room, but also to what furniture goes where and how it's attached or not attached.
That's a great example. Yeah, I mean, the simple piece there, I'm pretty sure we probably talked about it, was lab tables on casters, and you can have them for direct instruction. So you could actually teach math in there or English, but you also can unleash the casters, roll them over to the edge, and they connect to the countertop, which has a sink and your science equipment. So now they're science tables, and they all work. It works pretty seamlessly, where if you have built-in science tables around the perimeter of a building, it's really hard to teach anything else because half the kids have their back to the teacher. So, and even in science, sometimes you don't want to be doing labs all the time. You want to open the space up and do some engineering or do some creative pieces. At the middle school level, we definitely look at STEM and art as being really a lot of interplay in the space between them. If you do want to do a 3D art, which would be like ceramics or metals or something, then what we look at is how do you attach a small lab to a common space, so that, and sometimes those common spaces in art especially are even adjacent a library or a commons, so they can be used for other programming when they're not being used for that. So I think at the secondary level, we're seeing some really exciting things. One, we did a school a few years ago where they wanted an all open concept school where garage doors that roll up to a central commons and all the teachers would co-teach and everything would be great and very awesome. And so we helped the design team design that, and we laid all the spaces out. So every space was really flexible, but we secretly also layered it so that they could have a 7-period day with the doors shut if they had to. And lo and behold, 5 years later, the district has changed direction, and they're now going to do a 7-period day and use it as a normal school and not a project-based open concept school. So I think we have to be thoughtful about making sure that we don't get so creative that the spaces can't be used when the program changes. So Martin, is that getting at your question at all?
It does. And I'm going to ask if I can just talk for a couple of minutes, because I am much more comfortable today than I was 6 years ago about the question I'm asking. So I'm going to end with what you just said. You don't want to be so clever that you build tomorrow's school and it ain't tomorrow. And you know, that's a factor. But I think the way we teach changes dramatically from voice to video. From if you'd asked me 6 years ago about high schools, I would have thought about ranging from lecture style learning to tutorials, meaning you have different size classes and all that kind of thing. I don't think that's applicable today. And one of the reasons is what I call cultural factors. Something I hadn't thought about, funds get allocated by formula, and that might drive you into one size fits all. We like to have maximum choice of curriculum and classes, in contrast to, say, Europeans, where you have much less choice, but then you can use much more variability in putting together a program. And I think, therefore, we don't need something quite as wide ranging, I don't think. Work practices of people are a factor. And we can't predict the choice in curriculum and where technology is going all that well. What program you've done a great job from my point of view, comforting, in talking about how we use proximity of similar facilities, interchangeability between different types of programs. I'm going on because what I really want is to be absolutely sure that we are building the right widget, if you call it that. You know, I don't want to worry about bond sizes. People are like that. And oh my gosh, we didn't think about how and what we need. And that's what I want to be satisfied. And that's why I'm sort of ranting a little bit to what you do, what you're already doing, I think, but to emphasize it. I think that's really what I wanted to say. I don't think we can lose sight of that. And we do see a change in CTE towards classical subjects of education, the techniques of delivery. They have changed a lot. They've changed a lot since before COVID. We just need to be absolutely sure. Oh, and the other one that I forgot, that was what I was going on. Movement between classes. That is a major design factor in buildings. That's something else that I think you probably heard about with the high school, but I think is really, really important. You know your job and you're going to do it. I'm just whining a little bit to make sure it's under a spotlight.
Well, real quick, Director Barron, you make a good point. One key part, I'll say once the bond does pass, is establishing what we call educational specifications. And that is really looking at all your programs throughout the school and developing the right spaces for them and creating that flexibility to be multifunctional over the years and putting the right size around those spaces so they can be used properly. And that is a piece of the process that comes before the board for your review and approval through that entire bond process. Phil is a big part of that because of his time being as in education and his time doing this. So hopefully we'll be able to keep him on board to do that process. But you are absolutely correct. And that's what next step in the process once the bond passes is to do that.
And I'll add that this was one of the reasons why we didn't want to just kind of modify the existing building, as we didn't have the flexibility for flow. We didn't have the flexibility for these classrooms. And so really kind of, the facility committee really wanted to have a number that was felt reasonable. And all those kind of options turned into, we're not getting what we want. We're not getting a building that's going to be functional in the ways that we really want it to be functional. And so we stopped saying, what's the number, and started saying, what's the building look like? And I think that this kind of gets to why we people say, why a new school? Or like, because we want a school that we can be proud of, our students will be able to use for years to come. So that, just piggybacking on that, like, and that's why we're not just putting lipstick on a pig, as one of the options was called.
Yes, David did an excellent job. That I was going to say, the next steps after you pass a bond, you can do it before, but most likely in your case, you probably want to do it after. Is you can do the educational specifications, and architects do those, or firms like us do those. And the nice thing about firms like us is we work with all architecture firms, and so what you get is you don't get design getting in the way of specifications, and that happens. Architects are really good at designing buildings, but they may not be awesome at educational program understanding and classroom flow. And so by having those folks do the specs with your staff, then that allows the board and the district to keep I always say, keep their hands on the steering wheel during the design process and say, that is a phenomenal design. Please articulate how it meets all specifications that we've laid out. And you find out it doesn't meet some of the specifications. You're like, okay, go back to the board. We need to meet these specs. So it gives you a building that works beautifully in the way that you want a program to work, rather than just an amazing looking building that might have dead spaces, or like, why the heck are kids spending 8 minutes to walk between classes, kind of thing. So it's a great process, and those are what comes next. And to David's point, the board gets to get their eyes on, and often a workshop around educational specifications. And again, when we do them, we like staff to also participate, because staff have participated in the development of those specifications. We don't make assumptions. We listen and do semi-structured interviews, and then bring best practice to it. So, okay, thank you on that. So are there more questions about utilization and capacity and spaces? Because I've got the rest of the day, and this is a topic hot for me, so I'm excited. So no one ever at my dinner party wants to have these conversations. So exactly.
I mean, as much enthusiasm as you have, Phil, I think we're ready to move on to chapter 4.
Okay. So the condition of the facilities. This is pretty straightforward. There's 2 condition assessments. One is a physical condition, and that's done to a set of criteria set by OSPI, and the firms that do it tend to be architecture or engineering firms or construction management firms, and they come through and they're trained and they're correlated against these statewide standards, and they come through and they give you a score that is ideally aligned to other similar buildings in the state in the same scoring matrix. So there's functional adequacy, which our team does, and all of our folks who do the functional adequacy have been educators and worked in school construction. So what they come through and they look at with the principal, how well does the space serve the program you're trying to deliver? And the easiest examples of that are, do you have kindergartners in a standard classroom? Because we know that best practice says kindergarten classrooms should have a bathroom adjacent to or in the classroom. And we check off, are these does the district wildly diverge? If so, we'll use the district specifications. But this is where we start to come alongside what looks like educational specifications, because we say, what is a best practice for a middle school music room? And then, what's the district's expectation for that? So we evaluate each of the spaces on site in each of the buildings through that lens. And then they get scored. And so you can see here's the scoring for functional adequacy for each of your spaces. And Castle Rock Early Learning Center was very thought out about the types of spaces, and the program being delivered is the program the space was designed for. Perfect option. Mission View Elementary, one of its challenges is its program has evolved over time, and the school doesn't necessarily have the spaces that you need. And then also, when you have portable classrooms, those are, unless the district wants to have their future trajectory include portable classrooms. And examples of that might be schools adjacent military bases that will always see an ebb and flow and have to have portable classrooms to accommodate that. Then we're asked to downgrade those because trying to learn math while some kids shooting basketball hoops because your portables on the playground is just not great. Or you're outside the safety and security core of the main building, not great. So that they can big challenges. So these are the scores. You'll see that again, West Side scored low primarily because the core building is very thoughtfully done. The portable classrooms have to be utilized, and there's things like art and robotics and construction pieces being taught in a portable classroom with carpet. So no one would assume like that's the perfect space for that. So that's why that gets downgraded there. Even if the portable is in great shape physically, it's not the right space for that program delivery.
Can I ask a clarifying question maybe to Corey? Because when we're talking about the West Side High School portables, are we actually talking about West Side's use of the portables, or is that including part of our transitions program that's also now going to be moving as well?
So, yeah, a little bit of both. When Phil's team went in there, they were looking at all 6 of those portables, 4 of which are used for everyday programming for West Side. The other 2 were at that time mostly for the transitions program, and then the 5th one was a little bit of West Side programming. So yeah, it's kind of taking in a whole picture, but not really all of what West Side's doing. So good clarification.
And really great clarification, because it gets a little imperfect, especially when you have multiple programs in the same building. So, and if I recall, even at that place, you had this great modular building to give the kids a physical education experience, but it was lacking plumbing and a bathroom. So things like that. So that's the kind of things we look at and say, okay, it's great, and we feel it's great these kids have this opportunity, and it's great they have a space, but is it the right space? We try to shine a light on that. The physical assessment is what I shared, done by folks who know construction, and they're looking at the lifetime left in the building, if you will, with roofing, HVAC, finishes. We might look at carpet and flooring from a program perspective. They're going to look at it from a life cycle perspective. They're not going to care what you teach in that classroom. They care how much life is left in that. Is that a fair statement, David?
Yeah, I mean, we care, but that's
yeah, that's for the evaluation.
Exactly. Let's clarify that a little bit.
Exactly. So the scoring's a little bit different. So that's why we do highlight in red anything that gets into the poor category. They have an excellent category, and you'll be pleased to see that Washington Elementary is in excellent physical condition. You would not expect anything less. And Sunny Slope is great. You'll notice there's an extra column here, a clean energy audit. This is another one of those things that Corey mentioned earlier. There were some surprises that turned out to be serendipitous and good for the committee as we went through the process. It turns out the clean energy audit was coming up during the exact same time period, so we rolled it into this committee's work, and they were on a scale of 1, 2, and 3 for where they were falling on the audit, and that's why that scoring was included for the committee as they were prioritizing projects. You'll see that Wenatchee High School scored very low on the physical condition score and very low on the clean energy audit. And I believe also 88 on fair on the functional adequacy. And a school like Wenatchee High School is going to be tough, because to give one score to that entire building is a little, if you did each part of the building differently, it might be that the science room scored poor, but the gym scored, good, so they even out. And it looks like ALSC Architects did your physical condition evaluations. Great firm out of Spokane. So questions on condition, how the committee utilized functional adequacy and physical condition in their assessments, and clean energy.
Not hearing any.
Okay, then the last piece was the community input. This is the committee. You're probably most familiar with this. We listed all the folks, their roles. Again, it just really validated the diversity on the committee. we talked about the responsibility. We met 9 times. Most committees meet 5 to 6 times. Your committee, they kept wanting to work it, and we kept just coming alongside of them to do it. It was great. And then we just basically we went through every committee meeting and gave a little snippet. Again, this chapter tends to be for someone who wants to put the pieces together. How did you get to these recommendations? If they go through all 9 of these, they'll start to see a trend and how the committee worked it. Then they can go to the website and they can actually pull down the actual meeting minutes and agendas and supporting PowerPoints. Questions on the committee or the structure of the meetings? Okay. And then obviously this is again the part you're familiar with. This would be the recommendations. So the committee, did take quite a while to come up with a consensus, because there was a lot of back and forth, and people come from different places. But when we kept having them look at the data and the program and work together, we did come up with a consensus recommendation. So obviously complete the HVAC upgrades and retrofitting, and then a construction of a new high school at the existing site, which was again one of those things that came out of the committee. They kept asking, can we do it on the site? And David and I looked at each other and said, I don't know, let's see. And it turns out it looks doable. And again, that's the level we operate on planning. That's not design development. And then we said, if they do it on the same site, could we keep a couple pieces? Maybe. How would that work from a program? Yeah, that could probably work. So, again, this back and forth with the committee really made a difference. And you're familiar, you've seen all these pieces. Sorry about that. So hopefully, again, it rings true with what you've seen and been discussing. Then we did the cost estimation, which you did hear about. There's escalation rates. Things cost more every year, and construction is one of those. If you've ever seen a waterfall chart or a Gantt chart, it's like the construction standard, and we now use it across many types of things in life. And the same is with escalation. It's really a pretty mature factor. HVAC escalation is a little bit higher, estimated to be a little bit higher than the 6% at the construction level. But when the numbers get into the hundreds of millions, the escalation has a big impact. So time makes a big difference. And then we talked about the different funding sources, the SCAP. You're eligible for just under 80 million in SCAP. And then how do we maximize that if possible? And there's a lot of rules around that. And David and his team did a fantastic job with that. And then that's how the recommendation came to you which is pretty amazing. If you do look at a $373 million bond consideration from the committee's work, with 80 million of that being paid for by the state, which again is kind of taxpayers getting their dollars that they've invested back. That's a pretty significant chunk. So I'll stop. The rest of this chapter is obviously just, you should update this regularly. You should do what you're doing. You should vet it. And you should figure out what's the bite that the district wants to take. So I'll open it up to additional Q&A.
Excellent. Yeah, I would just encourage our school board members to ask Phil or David any questions they might have. And then we would or just a general comment on your feelings around the recommendations that have come. We have not had a chance to even discuss the recommendations as a conversation piece. And I really want to clarify back in the chapter where we talk about our committee members, and we had a great amount of, as Phil mentioned, elected officials and community members and parents, a great diverse group and a cross section. We also had a fair number of Wenatchee School District staff, and so I really believe that the recommendation does come with Wenatchee School District staff behind it as well, including myself. But yeah, I'd love to forward any questions to Phil or David while they're here, and maybe you all can talk about your thoughts around the recommendations themselves. And I don't know, Tucker, you want to kick us off, since you were at all 9 of those meetings and could give us the in-depth view yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to kick it off. I will say there was one of the nice things about having 9 different meetings is that you had, Corey said there's a very diverse list of people, and Phil was saying that same thing. you're obviously aren't going to see those people at every meeting. And so by having nine different meetings, there was some participation across different meetings. So it was kind of nice to have time to voice things. Someone can't come. We're still touching bases on them later. I think there was a big push at the start was we want this thing to pass no matter what. We think that is a numbers game. And we worked through that to no, we need to make sure this is the building we need. And then we can talk about, what if it doesn't pass, then what? But like, let's make sure we're getting what we actually want. And that was when we added the HVAC component to the elementary and middle schools was, if we are asking the community for a big chunk of money, and we're going to have to say, we know at this, we haven't gotten the email yet that an HVAC unit's out, right, Corey? There's nothing.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. But, but this was when we had one of these meetings right after Orchard had gone down. We were, renting a cooling unit they used for fruit packing plants to keep our students cold. We have these situations where we say, if we're going to ask the community for a lot of money, we need to make sure that we are addressing the real big problems. And that was the high school as a whole building, especially since everyone in the district, not everyone, most of the district ends up at that high school. How are we saying not only that we're going to put this money towards someone, toward as many students as possible, but also like how are we going to make people excited about staying in the district? How are we going to, Phil talked about 12% people go to private schools, and we're seeing that on the rise. How are we getting those students back? How are we making this more attractive? And that was, let's talk about something like the high school in a new building, but let's also make sure that all those other years on their way up, they're still having a positive classroom experience, right? If it's 90 degrees in the classroom, you're not going to learn. And you're going to go home and say, like, man, today was awful, or we canceled school. So, I think we did a lot of work to try and get this to be a number and realize that was really not productive for what we actually wanted for the district. And I think that a lot of passionate people really talked over Phil a lot about what he was not always getting to lead the meeting, but I think it really was. Phil at the last meeting said, let's have some more time. And the consensus was, no, we can nail this down. We want a new building, and we really want that to be clear. And why would we keep pushing this to a 10th meeting? And so I think the overall takeaway for me for the whole process was there were a lot of different people who came with a lot of different agendas to the meeting. And by the end, we really did have unanimous, we need a new building. And it really makes a ton of sense to have it in the same building or the same place. And if we can incorporate that construction into a spaces where you'll see those designs, let's keep the building as functional as long as possible. So we're not having to take 2,000 kids, put them somewhere else, stomp the building, build a new one. So, if you look at those designs, part of the reason why it's not just within the footprint, one, because the footprint wasn't great for what we talked about earlier, flexibility, but also it gives us the opportunity to build while we're having students on site. And so, we can minimize costs and maximize the speed that we're doing this. So my
Well said. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Jump in? Yeah.
You bet.
So a couple comments. So first, I appreciate this very, very, very in-depth review of this. And myself, probably having gone into the beginning of this process, I would have just assumed we were playing the numbers game and trying to come out with, because we know our community is tax averse and whatnot, that a bond is not feasible. We've failed them before, but the work you've done, the meetings with our community who were probably like-minded and had those same barriers, letting them get their frustrations, feelings out, and then showing us this very, very clear data just kind of dissolves all doubt that we have to proceed in this way. And so I appreciate the work that's gone into making this very clear, because it really does sadly paint a pretty dire picture that we're functioning in buildings that are barely functionable. And it scares me in some ways, because then it's like, we really need the community to support this because we don't have any other options. But yeah, I was of the mindset going into this that no, we're just going to have to make do with what we can because that's just the state of funding and education these days. Why would we put money into declining enrollment and things like that? But I think this just paints such a very clear picture, and the amount of participation that went in to get us there and get a group of very different minded individuals to think the same way is compelling to me. And so I think that's going to help. So I very much appreciate the work that you went through, the process that you took, and because it changed my opinion as well. And so now that the hard lift is how do we get this through? A very, very nitpicky, when I look at these diagrams, and I know we're so far away from ever designing this building or planning it, but when I just look at these space things, one thing that we've always been dealing with is these stupid tennis courts and not being adequate as they are. And so I see one diagram that, and I know bonds, you don't put your athletic facilities as much as possible in bonds. You kind of have to a little bit when you're redoing the entire site, but I've learned that you minimize athletic facilities in bond proposals. So I am a little bit nervous looking at this new concept drawing 6.3 that seems to suggest we're keeping the existing, which we already know are failing tennis courts. I assume we'd be doing something with those, but that was one thing that jumps out at me. But I know this is so preliminary and it's such a minor piece of this whole thing is I look at that and go, oh my gosh, are we going to do all this work to beautify the school and then keep these failing tennis courts that are too expensive to remove, too expensive to repair, that we're not going to do anything? Because I did see the next one would appear to replace those regardless and then rebuild them
So
somewhere else.
I'll speak real quick. I think it's great observation. And what we did with these two exhibits, 6.3 and 6.4, was can we fit a building on this existing site? That was our 100%. And then we started going through it and Dan actually pointed out, hey, those tennis courts are failing. Oh, we didn't know that. That's great to know. And so we really like 6.4 because that just demolishes them completely. It would get redone, right? I mean, you would be coming out with fields site, all new, all upgraded. So these were the purpose of these exhibits was strictly to say, can we fit a new building without compromising student learning at the same time? Yeah, it's going to be slightly inhibited or impacted because of noise and everything, which we will do our best to minimize. But could we do this where we didn't have to move kids off site? Right. And we didn't know. Honestly, I looked at that site and go, this is going to be really close. We all kind of had that moment of going, I don't know. Can you come? And and that was what the committee challenged us. Can you do a little more research on that? And so we went and got an architect team to, hey, give me this amount of square feet and start playing with what this could look like. Have fun. So they looked at two different ways of saying, yeah, we can make this work. And we're not saying this is the way the building is going to look. Please don't take this as the way the building is going to look, because that's something that we're going to actively engage the community in as far as what the layout is and how the building comes together on the site. But this was more of a gut check to say, yes, it can. Those are more in the weed details that we'll get through the process once the bond does pass.
I figured it was in the weeds.
Yeah.
So.
No, but it's a great observation, because one that Dan pointed out, those tennis courts are condemned, right? Oh, no, I didn't, but point well taken. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Mark or Martin or Maria? You want to go?
We can't hear. Thanks, Mark. No, it must not work.
Really?
Yeah, all right. I just mirroring what Julie and Tucker said, that thanks for all the work that has been done for this. It's extensive and it paints a really good picture that I think we can use. And I think it just builds us up for all the work that will be ahead to get our community on board and interested ahead of time, rather than just saying they're interested and then not showing up and then voting no. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Martin or Maria?
I don't really have much to add other than, I saw some common themes in this presentation as the presentations that we received as we were moving forward with or looking into the Columbia closure. And I know that was a very challenging time for the school district. But the data points that we received as we were looking into that potential school closure aligns with some of the information that we're getting today. And to me, it's reassuring as a parent, as a community member, as a board member, to know that even though the Columbia process was very painful, truly do believe that it was best for our school district, our community, our taxpayers. So I thank you, Phil. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Tucker, for the length of time. I don't have any questions. Just kind of wanted to provide that reassurance on those points I picked up on.
Excellent. Thanks, Maria. Martin?
The one area question I had has been well answered, and I also want to echo thank you very much for the good work. What I'm going to say is pretty similar to what Julie and the others said, but I would have put it in my own words. 6 years ago, I mentioned 6 years ago, before COVID, we started to touch this issue, and I did not feel comfortable. And in kind of engineering and abstract strategy words, I didn't see lateral thinking and longitudinal thinking the way that it's incorporated in the methodology that I see being used here. I know those sound like engineering words, but I think they're really, really important, and they can build confidence in the community as well. And what I see out of this process is a very clear identification of a desirable endpoint and getting that established early and having one that will work. Then you've got the transition to get from today to that endpoint where we can get into all of the other challenging things like bond support, double occupancy of a site and stuff like that. And I think the hazards those are really, really important. And it's possible that it's even probable that there'll be some adaptation and change and compromise needed to get around those obstacles. But I think what I wanted to say is the contrast with what I was worried about is there was a lot of focus on the obstacles of the transition. You could focus on HIVACs, that's not really an obstacle, but that kind of thing, not really seeing the whole big picture of the well thought out, desirable endpoint, as I'm going to say it again, thinking longitudinally and laterally and doing that kind of work, thinking about the education aspects as well, and the teachers and how the staff will react as well as the community. I just want to thank the facilities committee for having that kind of wide scope of attacking the problem and their vision.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. Liz, do you mind pulling up the 3-slide presentation that we have for other thinking items that we can jump into? And board members, if you have other questions that you want to ask as well, this would be a good time. But excellent. If you just want to go to the first slide, I think that's probably where we're going to land for most of our conversation today. So one of the things that we want to talk about is now that we have a recommendation, now that we've had to a little bit deeper dive into the facilities committee recommendation and report as well, starting to talk about the win. And I think this is one thing that's very important to all of us. And so I put most of the upcoming special election dates on there. Obviously, the idea of going out February 10th, 2026 is a little too early. We're not doing that, but I wanted to put it on there as a conversation piece. But also understanding that November 3rd, 2026, is a very viable option. About 14 months away from where we are now, is very real and very doable. I did put in parentheses, Eastmont School District may be, and look at going out at that time as well. And so there may be some pros and cons that we want to talk about, think about, with having a bond across the river at the same time, and a much different looking bond. bond as well. And then to also the other idea that February 9th, 2027 is also out there. Also put the resolution filing deadlines on there just to keep those in front of us. But thought I'd just open it up to conversations, and this is fresh. This is, you just had the facilities committee report. And so we don't have to make any decisions right now, but just to have a conversation about when do you all think would be potentially the best time to go out. And we have experts in the room. Phil and David are here with us as well. And you all as board members have, some varying experience, but a true deep understanding from our community. And Diana has been through the bond process before, as well as Eric and I, but not maybe leading it. We're just part of the community that was supporting it. So anything else I need to add there, David?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the other dates that you don't have on here are an April election and an
April.
August election. And I think, Corey, that was smart not to put on there. Those are the lowest turnout, the least effective dates to put in front of your community. So these, I do believe, are your three best options that are currently in front of you, whether the upcoming February, it's very close, very quick turn that you're not, I don't think, quite ready for, but I would ignore the April and August. But the April is something to think about as you look forward as a second option. If you look at what happened across the river with Eastmont, right? They came up just short in their February, went back out in April, and unfortunately maintained that small gap, do it. But that's what we often see, is that April run is utilized as a follow-up to the February. August, honestly, I have not personally had any districts use that. Very hard to get community engaged in August and get a whole grouping behind you there. So.
Excellent. Thanks, David. Go ahead, Tucker. You ready?
Let's say, do you guys want to say a quick something about the cost difference to the project going from November to February? I mean, we talked about the escalation being tens of millions of dollars, just waiting from construction starting at one date versus 6 months versus a year later.
Yeah, I think Phil, correct me if I'm wrong here. Do we use the November 26th start date as far as election date and moved from there, didn't we, in our cost analysis? Slowly getting on board.
I was sorry, I was just trying to bring that back up. Tucker beat me to the question.
I'm pretty sure that's the date we use. So, I mean,
Here we go.
it off is, in that 4 to 5% every year.
Yes.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. And as you saw, that cascading effect is not a pretty sight.
Right. And that's one of the things that we have talked about as well too, is the timing of this particular election, because we have the rising costs of just construction. We also have a lot of assessed value that is building and growing in our area, and so that is also a pro and maybe a con to when we want to go out, is how much of the Microsoft data centers do we want to see go online to help support and offset some of the cost of the taxes on our taxpayers. It's another conversation. Not that we want to prolong going out for a bond for a high school that we just spent time realizing and knowing that we need, but that is part of that conversation too, is what are the costs associated with waiting? What are the costs associated with moving forward quickly? But that's a good question. Maybe I gave you some time to find the answer.
We escalated out to
2029, correct. So that would be midpoint in construction. So that's a 2026.
And one thing that came up during the board meeting was kind of what does a timeline look like? So if anyone's about to ask that, I can answer it right now. So if hypothetically we were to go in the November of 26 route, you are looking at somewhere, we have to get a whole team on board, right? What the delivery method looked at doesn't really matter. So you're looking at probably a 3-month process to get your entire team put together. The design process is somewhere in that 12 to 14-month range for a building of this size. Okay, so now you're at a year and a half-ish, you're out. Construction's about a 2-year process, 22, 24 months for the building. And then you can add another 4 to 6 months for all the demo fields work to be done on top of that. So realistically, you're talking 3 to 3.5 years from that election. So yeah, you're getting to 29 pretty quick.
I think one of the things that might be helpful for me is I remember previously when we've talked about bonds, there was some strategic analysis done between whether going at a general election versus
Yes.
the versus the special election was better from a voter turnout, validation standpoint, those types of things. Because, you know, yes, I like the idea of sooner the better. I like the idea of a general election because there's likely to be better voter turnout. We're looking at a biennial, so it's not a presidential election. I just want to make sure to be able to validate based on the August election before it. But then, you know, with a general election, you may have more diverse output. So people who aren't just there to say no to your bond, it'll be one of many things. Versus a special election, what I sometimes worry about is while it is maybe a more special focus, you may get more people show up intentionally just to say no in that regard. And then we've got validation on top of a general election from before. I'm not as worried because this would be a biennial, so I think we could validate in an off year special election. But I remember some analysis just strategically on some of those things that may make one preferable to the other. 100% agree, no April or August. But I'm just a little bit torn between, I like the idea of sooner the better, because then we can start telling people, hey, we can get this done within this, you know, within the 2020s if we do this, versus putting it out another year. I mean, I have a 10-year-old and I'd love for her to go to a new high school.
So Julie, you are going through the same struggle everyone goes through,
Mhm.
like when to run it, when's the right time. You're right. Validation's really not an issue unless you follow the general presidential election. So most people tend to stay away from that immediate year-long time after a general. So hitting, you know, anytime after that, you're just fine from a validation. I think when we bring Trevor in, that will be a great conversation because he's tracking these on a much more detailed level on where you want to be in that regards. You know your community best. I mean, it's that fine line of more people coming out often can be a good thing. It can be a struggle to get there, and what the campaign looks like and how you want to go about it. So I will tell you, every district has a different philosophy as far as what it looks like. And that lady in the back there's probably got the best insights as far as how to market and what's going to be the best look for those dates.
Yeah. I mean, our levy did really, really well this last
Absolutely
February.
did.
So that gives me some good hope for February, is that people will show up just intentionally to support. But that's also the furthest date down the road and higher costs. So if we can plan and it makes the general election in February look good, I don't particularly care what Eastmont's doing. Let them yell at their bonds while we clean up the narrative over here. But I mean, that would be, I think, good, but it feels scary from a time, you know, a time to plan perspective. But it would be nice to have Trevor maybe break down if there's any material difference in those philosophies.
Absolutely.
And page 44 in the thing has the escalations if you want to see the difference year to year for the numbers we're talking about.
20 million worth.
Oh, yes. Great. Great points. And the other thing to think about, we want to think about in that analysis as well, is what other tax measures are going to be on the docket for the city or the fire or anything that also we need to think about. So those are some important pieces. Anyone else, Martin?
I was going to say, I don't have either much information or a strong opinion on this, but what I'm leaning to as I listen to it is as early as possible, unless, and as early as possible means we minimize the time that we survive on dying infrastructure, and we reduce the cost escalation in construction. And both of those should be things that could be explained to the thoughtful voter. Then you've got to have the unless, which is what else is happening, what the mood of the electorate is, and stuff like that. And I think it's rather like I said with the project, that think of a really good endpoint, which is to beat those two big things, provided we're prepared, but then add the unless. The tactical transition things are obstacles to be dealt with, not impediments to stop us thinking about doing what would be best.
Excellent. Well said. Go ahead,
And
Shelley.
say we're ready to run on November 3rd, and maybe we just, I mean, worst case scenario, it doesn't quite make it. Would we be able to refine it, fine tune it, and get it back in February? Would that be, because then I'm looking at that gap going, that's a better turnaround versus if it maybe doesn't squeak through in February, and then we've got to wait to the next general. Because again, I agree with I don't really think running in April and August is great.
I think you're nicely leading to slide 3 here, Corey.
It's true. We can move on to slide 3 just as an idea of something to look at, if you don't mind. Just the things, this is a list of all the things. But Mark and Maria, did you have any comments as well? Okay. Okay. Excellent. Well, and I think that this is a great segue for us as we're out of time. But something for us to consider as a board and as a school district as well. We will need to come down to that point where we decide on, oh, school's almost starting. This is great. But we will need to get to that point where some are not super excited about school starting. So we'll get to that point where we'll need to put an action item on our agenda for the school board so that we can talk about when we want to go out for the bond. But these are just some ideas that between David, Phil, Diana, and I and our team that we've come up with on the things that we need to learn, understand, and make sure that the board has enough information. And then our community also has enough information so they feel they can make an informed decision when we get to that point. So I want to thank Phil and David for being here. Thank you for your time and preparing and all of the 15 months that you put in with our facilities team, and Tucker as well for being on that committee, and board of directors. Thank you for your time today, and we'll close.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.